The bell had rung 11 seconds ago. Mike Tyson didn't care. He couldn't care. Something was wrong. Everyone in the arena could feel it. Mike Tyson was still punching. His opponent was against the ropes, no longer fighting back, no longer defending, barely conscious. His arms hung at his sides like broken branches. His head snapped back with each blow, absorbing punishment that had stopped being a boxing match and started being something else entirely. The referee was screaming. The crowd was screaming. Mike's corner was screaming. But Mike couldn't hear any of them. He was somewhere else. Somewhere darker. Somewhere that had nothing to do with boxing or rules or the man in front of him who was slowly dying on his feet. It was the 22nd of November, 1985. 3 weeks and 4 days since Cus D'Amato had closed his eyes for the last time in a hospital bed in Catskill, New York. 3 weeks and 4 days since the only father Mike had ever known had left him alone in a world he didn't understand. Mike was 19 years old, 215 pounds of grief compressed into muscle, his eyes empty like windows into nothing. His professional record was 11-0, all knockouts. The boxing world was calling him a prodigy, a monster, the next heavyweight champion. Magazine covers featured his face. Promoters fought over his contracts. Everyone wanted a piece of the kid from Brownsville who hit harder than anyone they had ever seen, but none of them knew what was happening inside him. The grief was eating him alive. Every morning he woke up and, for a split second, forgot that Cus was gone. Then the memory would crash back in, and the weight would settle on his chest like a stone. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't do anything except train, because training was the only thing that made the pain quiet down. Cus had been more than a trainer. He had found Mike when he was a 13-year-old criminal, heading nowhere but prison or an early grave. He had seen something in that angry, broken boy that nobody else could see. He had given Mike a purpose, a discipline, a reason to exist. Cus had legally adopted Mike, had made him family, had told him over and over, "You're going to be the heavyweight champion of the world." Mike had been there at the end, had held Cus's hand as the old man's breathing slowed, had watched the light fade from those eyes. And something inside Mike had died too. Something that would never fully come back. The fight was scheduled for Houston, Texas. Mike's opponent was Eddie Richardson, a decent journeyman, with a 16-4 record. Good enough to provide a challenge, but not good enough to seriously threaten the rising star. But from the moment Mike arrived in Houston, something was wrong. His trainer, Kevin Rooney, noticed it first. Mike was quieter than usual. This was a silence that felt dangerous, like pressure building behind a dam. "You okay?" Kevin asked him the night before the fight. Mike didn't answer. He just stared at the wall of his hotel room. "Mike, talk to me." "I'm fine," Mike said, but his voice was flat, empty. "I just want to fight." Kevin knew trying to stop him would be like trying to stop a hurricane. So he said nothing. And the next night, Mike walked to the ring carrying something far heavier than boxing gloves. The walk felt endless. The crowd roared his name, but Mike heard only silence, the silence Cus had left behind. The silence that followed him everywhere now, filling every room, every moment, every breath. The first round was normal, or at least it looked normal to the crowd. Mike stalked Richardson with his usual peekaboo style, head moving, hands high, waiting for the opening. Richardson tried to use his jab, tried to keep distance, tried to do all the things his corner had told him to do. Richardson landed a jab, then another. For a moment, he looked like he might have a chance. That moment lasted 3 seconds. 45 seconds in, Mike found the opening, a short right hand over Richardson's jab, landing clean on the temple. Richardson's legs wobbled. He grabbed Mike in a clinch, trying to survive, trying to clear his head. The referee separated them. Richardson backed away, shaking off the cobwebs. He was hurt, but still functional, still able to defend himself. Then something changed. Mike's eyes, which had been focused and calculating, went blank. Not tired, not confused, blank. Like someone had switched off the part of him that recognized the difference between a boxing match and something else. He rushed forward. What happened next would haunt everyone who witnessed it. Mike threw a left hook to the body that made Richardson's entire torso compress. Richardson doubled over, his mouthpiece flying out. Before he could fall, Mike caught him with an uppercut that straightened him back up. Then another hook. Then another. Richardson was no longer fighting. He was just absorbing punishment, his body jerking with each impact like a puppet on broken strings. Blood poured from a cut above his eye. The referee moved in to stop it. But before he could get between them, the bell rang, ending the first round. Mike didn't stop. 11 seconds. That's how long it took for anyone to reach him. The bell had rung, but Mike kept punching. Richardson was against the ropes now, held up only by the cables. His arms hung limp. His eyes were glazed. And Mike was still throwing. Left hook, right hand, left hook. The referee grabbed Mike's arm. Mike shook him off and kept punching. Kevin Rooney vaulted through the ropes and wrapped his arms around Mike from behind. Mike struggled, still trying to reach Richardson. Mike! Mike! It's over. The bell rang. It's over. What would you do if grief turned into something you couldn't control? For a moment, a terrible, frozen moment, it looked like Mike might turn on his own trainer. His body was rigid with rage, his muscles straining against Kevin's grip, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Then, slowly, something shifted behind his eyes. The blankness receded. The focus returned. Mike looked around the ring like a man waking from a nightmare, seeing the chaos he had created. Richardson slumped against the ropes, the referee shouting into his radio, medical staff rushing toward the ring. The crowd in stunned silence. Mike stopped struggling. Kevin felt the tension leave Mike's body and loosened his grip. Mike stood there, surrounded by the aftermath of his violence, his chest heaving, his hands still clenched in fists. And then, for the first time since Cus had died, Mike Tyson started to cry. Richardson was carried out on a stretcher. He would spend 2 days in a Houston hospital being monitored for brain swelling. He would never fight again, not because of permanent damage, but because something in him had broken that night. The will to climb back into a ring with men who could do what Mike Tyson had done was simply gone. Mike sat in his dressing room for an hour after the fight, refusing to talk to anyone. He just sat there on a wooden bench, staring at his knuckles. Kevin finally sat down beside him. "You want to tell me what happened out there?" Silence. "Mike, that wasn't boxing. That was something else. I couldn't stop." Mike's voice was barely a whisper. "The bell rang and I heard it, but I couldn't stop. It was like I wasn't there anymore, like someone else was throwing those punches." Kevin waited. I kept seeing his face, but it wasn't Richardson's face. It was everyone who ever hurt me. And Cus? I kept thinking about Cus, and how he's gone, and how I couldn't do anything to save him. His voice broke. So I just kept hitting, because hitting is the only thing I know how to do. The Boxing Commission reviewed the fight. There were discussions of suspensions, fines, sanctions. Mike had clearly violated the rules by continuing to punch after the bell. Richardson's team threatened legal action. In the end, nothing came of it. Mike was too valuable, too important to the sport, too much of a moneymaker to punish seriously. He received a small fine and a warning. The incident was quietly buried, mentioned only in passing in the newspapers before being forgotten entirely. But Mike never forgot. Years later, long after the championships and the scandals and the prison time and the bankruptcy, he would talk about that night in Houston with something that sounded like shame. "That was the first time I realized how dangerous I really was," he said. "Not dangerous like a boxer is dangerous. Dangerous like a broken person is dangerous. I had all this pain inside me, all this grief and anger, and I didn't know what to do with it except hurt people." He paused, the memory still vivid after all those decades. "Richardson didn't do anything to me. He was just a guy trying to make a living, trying to build a career, and I almost killed him. Not because he deserved it, because I was hurting, and hurting him was the only way I knew to make my own pain stop." Cus D'Amato had spent years teaching Mike to channel his rage, to use it as fuel, not fire, to be disciplined, controlled, precise. Emotions make you weak. Cus used to say. A fighter who fights angry is a fighter who loses. You must be cold, calculating. You must separate the man from the warrior, but 10, calm. Mike had learned that lesson, had mastered it, even. In the ring, he was ice methodical, patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But Cus had also been Mike's anchor, the thing that kept him tethered to humanity when everything else wanted to pull him into darkness. Without Cus, there was nothing holding him back. Nothing stopping the boy from Brownsville from doing what the boy from Brownsville had always done. Survive. By any means necessary. Eddie Richardson never blamed Mike publicly. In the few interviews he gave after his retirement, he spoke about the fight with a kind of distant respect. I knew something was wrong the moment I looked in his eyes, Richardson said. Before the fight, during the stare-down, his eyes were empty. Not confident, not focused, empty. Like there was nothing behind them except pain. He touched his jaw, still slightly misaligned from that night. People ask me if I'm angry at him. I'm not. That wasn't Mike Tyson. I fought that night. That was grief wearing boxing gloves. And you can't be angry at grief. You can only survive it. Mike Tyson won the heavyweight championship 13 months later, becoming the youngest champion in history at 20 years old. He dedicated the victory to Cus D'Amato, breaking down in tears during the post-fight interview. But the man who held that belt was not the man Cus had trained. That man, the disciplined, controlled warrior, had died a little bit that night in Houston. What replaced him was something more dangerous and more vulnerable at the same time. A fighter who could destroy anyone in the ring, but who could also destroy himself with the same uncontrollable force. The night Mike almost killed Eddie Richardson was the night the world caught a glimpse of what was really inside him. Not a monster, not a machine, just a broken boy, throwing punches at a pain he couldn't knock out. And that boy would keep fighting opponents, demons, himself, for the rest of his life.